Welcome to the Scale Up Valley podcast, where we bring the best founders, CEOs, and investors to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today's guest is Alexis Normand, CEO of Greenly. Alexis, welcome to the show.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Mike.
And yeah, you have just raised the 52 million B round to help smaller companies track CO2 emissions. Congratulations. It's not an easy market, especially to raise growth, or nowadays it's difficult to say what is growth and what is early stage, right? But B, it's already a very significant B round, a significant milestone. So it's congratulations for that. And yeah, let us know more about yourself. How did you start Greenly? A bit of an overview about Greenly.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, all the suffering is quickly forgotten after the deal is done, but it was a bit of a long journey, to be honest. About myself, so Greenly, is not nearly 5 years old. So we started the company in 2019. I personally had spent some time in tech in the quantified self space at a company called Withings in France and in the US, leading its Boston office. So helping healthcare organizations equip patients basically with devices. And there was already this idea that if you could track metrics seamlessly in a more precise manner, you could change people's behavior to adopt healthier lifestyles. And there was an economic model for saving future costs. So I had thought about how this could apply to climate change already at the time. But I guess I liked the company a lot, so I had to leave it after an acquisition for me to think about doing something else, and that's what happened.
I'd like to announce that this episode is sponsored by the web agency WebTech. WebTech are specialists on getting customers to companies. They are booking 250 meetings a month to their own sales team, and their business strategy is to teach other companies what they do for themselves. I'm really excited to announce that I've agreed with Pontus Lenel, CEO of WebTech, a special advantage to our listeners. Our community has now access to a free design suggestion on how your website could be improved, and or free trials for both SEO and digital marketing. Oh, and by the way, we are working with them too and impressed by the results. You can do the same. You just need to go to bewebtech.com/Mike, bewebtech.com/Mike, and tell them you are a listener of the show. Now back to the podcast.
The company was acquired by Nokia. I mean, long story. Point is, I ended up following my wife back to France in 2019 and being fairly independent already, mostly thanks to her. And so I thought, this was going to be the time to start a company, or I would never do it. And I think what I enjoyed a lot in that previous experience is the network of engineers, of investors, of entrepreneurs in the US, in Europe. And so actually I had a few cards in my hands to get started. And so we said, okay, let's do the quantified self of basically carbon accounting. So we started with an app that would sync with your bank account and automate emissions tracking based on your spend. So which had some success. We raised our first pre-seed round based on this in 2019. We got a couple tens of thousand people to download it, and so on and so forth. But I won't spend too much time on this because in the space of 6 months or so, we pivoted twice. So we realized this big blocker of people uploading, of course, their bank data, because we weren't, a household name like Mint or anything like that yet. So trust was an issue. And so we said, okay, how about we push this to banks so that they could add carbon footprint to the information you have in your bank account. And actually, some of the leading European banks contracted with us on this. So we had an early success, and that was great. But we also quickly realized that best case scenario, we would do this with 50 banks, and maybe if we were super clever, we'd charge a lot for it. But um,
Right.
we were kind of violating one of the first rules, I think, of building a startup, which is to have a lot of feedback loops and iterate a lot on the product. And if you do
Right.
the selling to very large account with not that much fundraising, it's a little hard to, progress as a company. So, and at the same time, we didn't want like to the whole business to rely on, comms budget from banks, basically.
Hmm.
We wanted to have real impact and have a lot of customers and learn and iterate a lot. So we realized now that we had like spent 8 months or 6 months into this carbon market, we started to be a little more knowledgeable on it, and we realized that looking at the B2B market, that this was a space where most of the offering was essentially one of experts, working for very, very large companies who were rather mature on it, already had teams publishing ESG reports and all that stuff, but extremely manual spreadsheets, all that stuff, very often very well done. But it struck me, I mean, for the same reason that we wanted to do this B2C app, that carbon tracking was important enough a topic that everybody should be doing it, and that the way the B2B market was structured at the time wasn't going to make it for SMBs or even mid-market companies. I mean, there
Hmm.
just weren't enough consultants to go around, and most of these companies were being priced out of the market. And so we saw this coming as, one day everybody's going to be doing this, just like financial accounting, but there's
Right.
no tech for it. And so, and at the same time, the paradigm was shifting because obviously climate change is a very pressing problem, and so the pressure keeps mounting up. You have more
Hmm.
regulatory pressure. You have, I mean, 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded in 2000 years, right? And it's just because
Hmm.
we record before 2000, we don't have trees old enough to record before that.
Yeah.
So the point being, this is becoming mainstream, but the tech for making it mainstream is not really there. And so there's this
Hmm.
movement of that you can foresee already in 2020 of massive adoption. And and so from then on, it's textbook disruption in the sense that you go for a larger market of less mature customers, which are SMBs, with, in a sense, a lesser product than the IBM mainframe that you had to be, which is you build a personal computer. At first,
Right.
it's good, and then you get to a point where the personal computer is much better. But to do that, you have to start with a simpler offering that's 10 times cheaper and that meets their reporting need. And so we realize, new world, new tools. So you have to go beyond the
Hmm.
PowerPoint spreadsheet approach and move on to a platform. And so we need to build a
Right.
platform. And so that's when we pivot basically a second time, 8 months into or 9 months into the company. You say, okay, let's
Hmm.
do B2B and let's start with simple companies and let's repurpose what we had done using banking payments to automate some tracking. Let's apply this to accounting. Of course, now we've learned that accounting and just looking at a spend is not good enough. So we've
Hmm.
expanded this in many, many directions. But the point being is we got to first start to start offering
Right.
something quick to companies. And of course, the more customers we've had ever since. I mean, after this, we started scaling a sales team. So now we have and a product team. So now it worked. So we have about 2,000 customers now. And
Well
of course,
done.
the was immensely evolved since then. It's not so much about the accounting and about a ton of other data that we upload, but the idea of how can I put it, simplifying or lowering the barrier. I mean, easing the pain point, which is data collection
Hmm.
through tech, through automation, through integrations. That's still here. and the idea of democratizing through lower price points, that's still here. And the idea of educating people who very
Right.
often are first timers, that's still here. So sorry, I'm a little talkative, but just to give you that overview.
That's perfect to understand the story and what were the different evolutions, because sometimes we have this idea that we start with a vision and we stay with that vision forever, and we need to iterate a lot until we find that product market fits, and then we go to market fits, and then we start scaling more aggressively, which is the stage you are in now. So you
The
were saying that you have,
vision, yeah,
yeah,
sorry, the vision remains the same. You know, you have
yeah,
everybody needs to track carbon. It's just that that you have to,
right.
there are different ways to approach it. And of course, and here I think on execution, you have to be extremely pragmatic.
Exactly. That's a good rephrasing of what I said. So the mission vision is still the same, but the way you get there and the stages to get there, and the approach and the business model might be different, right? So as we evolve, it's a good point. And in terms of, you said that you had 2,000 customers in terms of the ICP. Do you have any kind of geographical focus? So you were talking that your focus is on SMBs, any industry focus. So how would you describe your ideal customer profile?
Sure. So of course that changes over time because the platform, is now enterprise grade. So we're moving up. But when
Yeah.
we got started, it was very SMB, and we started with the early adopters, so the tech, the finance crowd, and now increasingly we're working with the manufacturing companies, retail companies.
Mhm.
So to be honest, it's pretty reflective of the state of the economy. We started out in France because it's also a place where enterprise are very mature on this. So they've been putting pressure on SMBs for a long time. And so there's a
Mhm.
lot of competition, but there's also a lot of things to fight for. So customers to fight for. So
Mhm.
that's helped us, scale. And about 2 years ago, a year and a half, we started internationalizing. So France is actually maybe around a 30-40% of our business now, most of it happening now in the US and in the UK, um,
Mhm.
where I mean, I think European countries are fairly similar in terms of where the demand comes from. It's this customer pressure. I mean, essentially, if you're an SMB, a mid-market company, and you're not doing it, you're locked out of procurement. And this is starting to happen in the US for suppliers of
Mhm.
specific companies like Walmart, like Airbnb, like the US Army. I mean, you have
Yep.
these 400 companies that have pledged to really do something, and so they their whole supply chain needs to as well. So that's the reason essentially companies do it. And so in terms of ICP, it's this SMB, it's this mid-market company, but it's also this persona of a person in charge of ESG. But it's kind of half of these companies have no one in ESG, so it's a first timer who, think of it this way. If I asked you to do the financial accounting of a fairly large company or even an SMB, and you'd never done accounting in your life, and you had to learn, both the software and the discipline and publish books. So carbon
Wow.
accounting, that's what happens to half of our customers. And so you have with
Wow.
a topic that hasn't been taught at school so much. So you have to be extremely like, programmatic in terms of steps and so on so educating your customers. And the other half of our customers already have ESG people who know something about this, and so they're more expert. They're more interested in the accuracy and the actionability of it all. Less you have the guys coming in first to like, hey, let's get this reporting done, and once I'm there, maybe I'll start progressing. And you have the guys who've already done it, who are more about how do I improve myself year over year. So that's our
Right.
ICP, and of course, the beginners, the learners end up becoming experts. It's a journey in itself. But I would say most people in this market are learners. And by the way, one of the ways we find them is by looking for new hires in this space.
Right. Good. Trigger-based go-to-market, right? Which is now something that is very trendy in the market. How do we find the triggers to be able to approach the customer at the right time, instead of spending a lot of money trying to target customers that are not in the market to buy a solution? So we might be the best solution in the world, but if they are not looking for a solution and for a product to buy, we are just losing our go-to-market budget.
I can't say we've cracked it. It's but we have some elements, right? But
Yeah.
it's we're constantly iterating on doing this better. But I guess we have a strong inbound motion. You know, we have frankly, yeah, maybe 70% of our new business comes from inbound. So it's
Amazing.
and I think that's pretty key, because if you look at our market, venture capitalists are very, you know, they'll have in their they'll be looking at companies who've raised a lot, who many of which have positioned themselves for the enterprise, thinking that, okay, there's already a market there. Let's put software there where there were spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I guess it makes sense. Okay, but except as a result, you're gonna have to. You're not creating a mass market. You have, you know, 1,000 companies to sell to. So we have millions of companies to sell to. So you need our contract value is pretty low compared to these guys. So we're able to be super cost competitive. We can always be 5 times cheaper, even in the enterprise companies for enterprise customers when we get there. But the point is, you have to be smarter about how you find your customers, and so you have to be basically a media. People to come to your website, you know, on their own.
And do you think that where are the inbound efforts? Where are you having success kind of driving inbound leads? Is it mainly through content? Is it
It's it's I mean, it's, of course, there's some ads and stuff, but that can become quite expensive. So a lot of it comes from our organic traffic. We have a team focused on content. You know, they publish like nearly 10 articles a week, and we rank pretty well. So we have like 3 million visitors a year on our website. And that's you know, we started this pretty early. So I think even if you're, you know, it feels from the outside that anybody can get started on this, and maybe you can to some extent, but because of the cost competitiveness of what we do, having a strong inbound motion is a competitive advantage that's hard to catch up with, because it takes time to build all the content, you know.
Absolutely. And maybe let's give a step back. What are the metrics that you can share about the business in terms of head count, revenue? What can you disclose to the audience?
So ever since the Series B, we've been recruiting quite a lot. So if you oppose our revenue with our headcount, it might strike. There's a bit of an unbalance that's rather recent.
Right.
We were actually not that far from profitability before, but overall, high level, we're at 10 million AR, more or less, more than less, rather. But and right now we have about 180 people, but that's also the result of recent hiring.
Will catch up the revenue, right? Of course, yeah. So you need some time to make them productive, and then being able to create the value, and then get back to the revenue per employee, or the revenue per employee metric.
Those kind of things. I mean, it's a third product, a third you know, engineering support, that kind of stuff, and a third sales, basically.
Yeah, you were saying that it's a third.
A third of the staff is sales. A third
Sales?
it's customer success and product, and marketing. I mean, I don't have the exact split in mind, to be honest, but
Got it. Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And this is one of the main discussions. I'm happy that you nailed it. I'm just giving some metrics to the audience to follow our conversation on go-to-market. So we are discussing that acquiring customers is becoming more and more expensive, and the VC game is not anymore the growth at all costs game. So we need to have unit economics that makes sense. And you were saying this is a very strong competitive advantage to make inbound work, and you don't make inbound work from one day to another. It needs to be a early investment and a long-term investment to make it work. So
yeah.
you would say those
uh,
were one of the best decisions that you made early on, right?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense, yes. I mean, we've been pretty balanced in outbound and inbound sales, but obviously, because you're educating your market, you need to lead by content, and so it's true that a new customer that comes because he's read your stuff online, the cost of acquisition will be 10 times lower than any other mean, because once you've built a lot of content, it stays, and it tends to the value of it tends to grow over time as you get better referenced on Google or other. Whereas paying an ad, it's like, you can it just never stops. So
Right.
the general strategy that any company, I think, should have is to try and give Google less and less money over time, and become more and more your own media,
Yeah.
which uh, otherwise you're just giving away too much of your revenue to the ads platforms.
But then it comes to a moment, especially after 10 million, that maybe your inbound motion needs to scale up, right? And outbound motion and the go-to-market motion in general, and you have that pressure to keep growing at the same
Yeah, I mean,
pace. So do
so,
you
so
feel
I
that
don't
the yeah,
I don't think I figured it all out. I mean, you can certainly scale through outbound for longer. I mean, there's this saying that inbound always plateaus, and you have to scale with outbound. I mean, I've read all the startup books you can, the Jason Lemkin and so on. So
predictable revenue and so on? Yeah,
from impossible to inevitable and these
exactly.
which are, when you get started, good reads, because they're full of common sense. But the in our case, I don't think inbound has plateaued yet, because, I mean, let's be serious here. Climate change is all we're going to be talking about in the next 30 years, because everything that people did 20 years ago is what's going to have a consequence on global warming in the next 20 years. And everything we do now is going to help reduce global warming in 20 years. There's this parabolic effect of the consequences of your actions are not immediate. So it's just going to get hotter for some time, no matter what we do. So people are just so the idea that inbound could plateau on a topic that's just going to become more and more visible in people's
Hmm.
daily lives is just a misunderstanding of the problem. I mean, if
Okay,
I were a SaaS optimizing expense reports,
productivity tool. Yeah,
it's great business or everything you want, but it's not top of mind as much as something
right.
that's going to affect. So I think there's a lot of and the reality too is that when you start being serious about this topic, I'm not saying that counting your emissions is going to fix all the problems, but it's a necessary foundation for everything else. So I'm talking here about a market that can be as big as financial accounting. Truly, everybody's going to have to do it. So I can't say at which speed exactly it's going to happen, but we're certainly going to feel more and more of the pressure. So
Got it.
the point, inbound is not going to plateau anytime soon because people are going to be looking for more solutions here.
Yeah. And how are you thinking about go-to-market to help other founders and CEOs and executive teams that are going through the same issue? Do you believe that inbound will help you to get to 25 or even 50 million in revenue? Are you already, you were saying that you are also, you already have a motion, an outbound motion. What are the motions that you see that will help you to, you know, to get to the, maybe now the main goal is the 25 million, right? So then you need
So
to think about the
So,
50.
and again, here I'm focusing a lot of sales, but the product work is very important too, because when you have
Right.
that many customers and you're and with a relatively small climate expert or support team, the product really needs to do the work of, you know, carrying people to the finish line of getting a report and then to
Adoption, expansion,
uh,
etc. Yeah.
exactly. But on the sales part, of course, we have and have been recruiting a lot of account executives, right? Which start as sales dev SDRs.
Yep.
So we're definitely doing outbound. And so I'm not saying it's not important. I'm just saying it's in a sense perhaps more expensive
Right.
at a SaaS metric level. But
Yeah.
it's but our efficiency and our ability to scale is very much a function of these guys too, from SDR to AEs, because this is a new market. I mean, basically, like less than 5% of companies have tracked their emissions, and there's a reasonable assumption that maybe 80% of them will, everyone except the very, very small companies. So in that case, you're educating a market, and you don't make a purchasing decision on this stuff until you've talked to someone to like basically get educated. I was talking to one of our sales guys who just ramped up and is starting to have good results in the US right now. And I asked him what made the trick, how, when did things start unlock for you? And he said, well, when I stopped trying to sell, when I became a teacher, an expert in this matter, and I like gave a lot of explanations to people. So it's all about sharing the knowledge on it. So it's cool to be a sales in our team, because people buy when they've learned something talking to you.
Right.
If I tell you, Mike, what is scope 1, 2, and 3, and I'm not gonna test you on the show, but most people aren't exactly sure what that is. It's
Yeah.
how you quantify carbon, the direct emissions, the scope 2
You
electricity.
can't test me. I don't know.
Well, and like most people, but
Yeah.
it's also something like, but you probably know what a balance sheet is, and
Yeah.
and
Formally, yes, for my clients.
and a P&L, right? So I
Yeah.
think things like, what are the big buckets of your direct emissions or indirect emissions through electricity, or indirect through supply chain, which is scope 3 more or less. That's something probably everybody will know pretty soon, and which they don't. And so it's like, you've talked to one of our sales guys, hopefully you've learned something that will be useful for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Uh, and so our challenge when it comes to scaling, because that's what we're talking about, is
Yeah.
being extremely good at educating not just our prospects, but our own team to educate the market. And so we've actually got more and more sales engineering, investing in curriculum, in tools for people to pass tests, and basically the more experts our sales are, the bigger the prospects they can manage, because people are like, they're looking for stuff they can't do themselves, which usually involves a deeper understanding of a sector, an industry, having the right the right details and analytics, which is something that needs to be taught.
And so you were saying that in terms of growth, do you see, of course, the inbound motion will keep working, the outbound motion, you are refining it still, and you are seeing that as your sales reps or as your SDRs and account executives approach the customers from a position of educating them instead of trying to sell them at all costs, results get better. You also see that maybe launching refined versions of the product or launching new products might help in terms of the expansion, in terms of scaling up the business. But the market is so big, and it will keep. You have an expanding TAM, which is great, and maybe an area that you don't have too much competition yet, because as you said,
No, I
in the
have a lot of competition, and actually I'm more successful in the places where I have more competition.
competition.
So why
Right.
is that? I mean, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but the truth is because it's a new market. The more competition you have, the more people are educating the market. And so
Yeah.
if your conversion rates are more or less the same, you can thank your customers for educating you. You can thank your competitors for educating your market. So,
Yeah.
and it's funny because when you're talking to VCs, you always have people saying you have not enough competition or you have too much competition.
Mhm.
It's like you're always too young or too old for anything, but you're never the right age. So, but I can tell you, competition, you're much better off with too much competition than too little.
That's a very good point. Okay. Maybe we link that, and I think that you are already talking about this, that you found, and you, in our pre-call, you described the example of the inbound movement with HubSpot. So it seems that you have here a big trend ahead of you that you can serve, that you can leverage this expanding TAM. So the market will keep expanding. And the good news is, typically on VC, we prefer markets that we acquiring the customer for the first time. We are not replacing an existing solution, because then uh, some companies don't like to change, and you need to be 10x better, 10x cheaper, and all those things. And still, you need to convince them, because if the solution is working for them, right?
We still need all of that because we have competition, right? But I mean, I was sailing the other day, and it felt easier when I had tailwinds,
Right.
forward.
That's the point. Yeah, the tailwind
So
effect, exactly.
absolutely, but no, we I mean, it's about seizing the opportunity of expanding markets. So you still need to have the better product. You still need to have a good outbound sales motion. But it's just especially if you're in our position of trying to be the best value basically for money, the most affordable platform. You have to be extremely cost conscious. And so scaling through inbound is just a better deal, but it's not, but it's also a little bit less predictable in terms of how
Right.
fast the leads acceleration rate will come, because fundamentally that's your growth rate, right? How fast your leads grow.
Right.
And so since you don't master it fully, I mean, even with ads, at some point, there are only a given number of people Googling carbon accounting, and you can't dance faster than the music, right? And so you can create SEO, you can create the demand, but the timing is not totally yours to master. Whereas the SDR outbound motion is more controllable.
Makes sense. Anything that was really kind of a eye opener for you in terms of go to market that completely challenged the way you think? Because I think that nowadays a lot of CEOs are thinking about go to market given the current market conditions, and making, again, we need to be able to find a way of growing in an efficient and profitable way, or at least in the most cheaper way possible.
Well, maybe to me it was eye-opening, but I think to maybe your listeners it will be less so. But I really realized the power of verticalization. No one cares about an all-purpose carbon accounting platform. No one wants to buy a car. People want to buy sports cars or family cars or
Right.
uh, and so no one wants to buy carbon accounting. People want carbon accounting for um, the textile industry, for the tech industry, where we specialize on cloud computing emissions, or manufacturing, supply chain. So the verticalization is key. Uh, and so it needs to permeate across your organization from marketing to sales to delivery. Another thing is this we have customers that are experts and we have customers that are beginners. And so if you have a one size fits all, even within the industry, it doesn't work because if you give too complex a platform to beginners, they hate you for asking them to do too much work. But if you give too simple a platform to experts, they hate you for not being accurate enough. And so you have to tier the experience by two dimensions, really, which is the vertical and the expertise and motivation of the customer. You have people who are just and so I guess this is probably true in many businesses, but we've had to learn to do this. And then we've also had to learn that we shouldn't be selling to every type of customers before understanding that they were real here for the long term. And so at one point when you're in Series B, people just look Series A, people just look at your growth, but in Series B, they look at your net retention a lot. And so you have to start choosing your customers more often between those that are just there for a quick fix and those that are in it for the long run.
Very good point. I know that this might be a little bit tactical and time is flying and we need still to go to the fundraising and to your Series B story before wrapping up the episode. But I think sometimes one of the issues with content is understanding that if we are an healthcare organization, it's not the business, or it's not the founders or the business executives who will kind of write down health content. It needs to be doctors, right? So sometimes, because you are good with content in the marketing team, you need to find people that know what they are writing about. And sometimes this is one of the issues that happens, why inbound doesn't work and why content doesn't work, because the content is not tailored for that ICP, for that verticalization that you were talking about, and that difference. The same with me. If I talk to SaaS, to first-time founders that don't know the basics of metrics, I can go very basic, right? And they would love. But if I'm talking to a senior person that consumes all the reports out there, that knows that from one place to another, if I'm just giving them the basics, they are kind of looking to my content and thinking, oh,
No,
this
it's
doesn't.
true. It's
Yeah.
it's a good point, but I think we've had the same content team for a while, so they've become quite expert themselves, and
Okay.
they are fed as well by all the stuff. I mean, we produce reports for every company, so we've got a pretty good idea of what emissions look like in the agricultural sector
Nice.
or industry or packaging or tech and stuff. So a lot of so we have a rather big research and methodology team. So they're part of the engineering stack, but they build what we call emission factors, which are essentially like conversion ratios from, say, hey, I have a gallon of fuel to that's 2.8 kilograms of CO2, and that's simple, but when it's cement, when it's and you have 60 types of cement or copper, you need to basically expand to a level of precision that goes beyond what are in publicly sourced databases. And so we build knowledge in-house for our customers, which our content team many very often leverages to build industry-specific articles or case studies. So if you go on our Greenly Institute website, you'll find articles on the carbon footprint of the wine industry, you know, or stuff like that.
Super
Because
nice.
50 customers at least in this space, but you'll find some stuff in a lot of verticals. And so and I think I haven't given so much thought to it, to be honest, but I think the way things work is such that they have been pushed to become experts.
Experts themselves, like it is happening with the outbound sales team
Sales, marketing,
and
delivery team, and so
across
on.
all go-to-market. Yeah, makes a lot of sense.
We
Also, it's
try
a
and
new field,
leverage.
as you said.
And we, by the way, we have like Slack channels that are like full of questions all day long, and there's so much content that we were like getting lost. And now what you see is you have Slack, you have Notion. They're launching like Notion AI or Slack AI. So you had to spend a lot of time looking for info. But I think this Gen AI thing in our case is really useful because a lot of the content that we've built over the years is suddenly much more accessible for our own guys, our own sales, and that's a real plus, because we save time not having to answer the same question twice, but we save time answering it to ourselves, but also to our customers and so on.
Absolutely. In terms of fundraising, so what would you share as the kind of do's and don'ts and kind of the main highlights and lessons learned from your 52
Well,
million B rounds?
I mean, you've interviewed a lot of people, so I guess you've heard a lot. But in my case, this was, maybe the fourth fundraise because we did a pre-seed and then we did a seed and then we
Series A.
did pre-Series A and then we did a Series A and then we did a Series B and we still have an okay percentage as founders, I guess. But
Absolutely.
the point is, it felt more and more professional, as we scaled up because Series A was all about our growth and our traction, but Series B was all about the detailed metrics like AR, of course, annual recurring revenue, but LTV to CAC, net retention, cost of acquisition. It was much rule of 40. I mean, all those stuff you find in the guide,
Right.
that became a real thing. So I think you have to know your numbers, basically. I was lucky to be, I made a decisive recruitment with basically a hint that it would be decisive, but it became apparent throughout the process. Our chief operating officer is a woman who used to work at Morgan Stanley. She's called Laetitia Carl, and she'd done it 100 times, but on the other end of the table. So what
Awesome.
felt to me in many cases is like irritants or stuff I didn't want to do was to her a bit business as usual. So
Yeah,
it's because you have
that
to answer.
helps.
What I would say as well is we are lucky to be part of an identified category, carbon accounting. You've had a couple fundraise. We have a lot of competition. So basically, competitors who've raised. So basically, you have structured VCs who've talked to a competitor and then they're scouting for 10 other companies. So it's best to be in a competitive market because if you're in this space where no one's in your category, no one knocks on your door.
Yeah.
So we had a lot, and I mean a lot of people knocking on our door because we're media, and so on. So you quickly Google when you
Inbound again.
have a lot of inbound, and so it's just a funnel. Like every other funnel, but it's a little bit of a tougher funnel than selling um, at least in the early phases of the fundraise. So basically, we talk to a lot of people. I think it's very, very time consuming. So the so I think where I was rather lucky is or you can only afford to do it at a certain stage when in a sense your operations can run without like a founder meddling in everything the company, so it already speaks to the business more or less running, you know, on your own. If the founder can basically spend 50% of his time, you know, having conversations where 90% of them are not gonna
Right.
lead to
Get
anything.
anywhere. Yeah.
So I have two other co-founders, and we have a lot of good managers. So I think the business was running, um, but of course, you still want to minimize the waste of time. So you have a lot of people who are like, they looked at the category and actually they're maybe too big for you right now. So they're just fishing for info or stuff. So it's good in terms of don't spend too much time with the wrong people. So we did a lot of qualification. So people
Right.
had to earn the right to speak to me. And of course, when at some point the raise looked like, you know, maybe we were in a difficult spot. Some people told me that, you know, my process was messed up and I was arrogant and I should have talked to every junior analyst of every VC. But the reality is, of course, when it's successful, you were right, right? If you're not successful, you're
Absolutely.
always wrong, whatever you did. And if you're successful,
Yeah.
everything you did was the right move. But you
Yes.
have your doubters during the process. So
Absolutely. There's
um,
no perfect process. Yeah. Fully agreed. Good point.
so anyway, a lot of qualifications, and I think it seemed to me like the European funds really had money, whereas a lot of the US funds that I spoke to either had too much money and we were too small, or didn't
Mhm.
have money and were using, in some cases, us as bait to raise money. Which of course
Wow.
I mean, it's part of the game. It's fine, you know,
Yeah.
I'm not resentful or anything, but of course you want to understand this subtlety soon enough to stop conversations soon enough too, because it's really a time management thing here. It's like
Awesome.
your sales funnel, right? You have to disqualify people early on.
Absolutely. Cool. Let's go to the. We have a set of quick questions and answers, but maybe let's go to the number one, and we need to wrap up to respect your time as well, Alexis. So, if you would have the opportunity to have a coffee with your younger self in 2019 when you founded Greenly, what did you tell to Alexis at that time over
Mhm.
coffee?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I'd say, you know, have fun and make all the mistakes because it's part of the. I think the part of being an entrepreneur is it's the learning process. So if you're given the perfect roadmap of not doing any mistakes right away, it's not as much fun, you know. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, could we have been quicker? Maybe. I mean, I mean, I don't know exactly what to say to this because I don't want to be arrogant in terms of like, hey, we did all the right stuff in the right steps. I don't think that's true. Um, what I would say is don't stress. It's going to work out. It always appears more risky than it is. Uh,
Hmm.
I'd probably also say it's all about the people. So you have to focus relentlessly on finding the people you want to work with in the long term, and be as tough as you can be, you know, on building an excellent team. And it's very hard to be tough. And I think most people are not tough on HR, but the quality
Hmm.
of the team, and I'm not tough, you know, I'm not but I try to be. It's probably the people is the most important part. So
Absolutely.
focus on finding the best people. But people, I mean, it's not like just the elitist thing. It's who you want to work with. It's who you want to have fun with, who you're going to learn from, and so on. So
Culture.
culture and people. I mean, it's who you're becoming friends with, who you're going to spend years with. I think that's something you learn along the way.
Awesome. Alexis, thanks so much for making the time to be with us today.
Well, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
It was great to talk with you today, Mike.
And to our community, thanks for being there as well. We hope it was super helpful to help you scale your business a little bit faster and with less pains. Talk to you soon and keep scaling.